Welcome to a 10-1-10-1 review. My name is Nessa, and today I'll be talking about Seeds of Calamity and how I felt after playing the game for 10 minutes, 1 hour, 10 hours, and 1 year in-game. As a person who does not have a lot of time to play games, I think that first impressions are important, and the first 10 minutes to an hour of a game should give you the basic rundown of what it has to offer. That being said, I also know that farming and life sim games need some time to shine, which is why I think that it's also important to review the game at 10 hours and after a year in-game. How I felt at the 1 hour mark might change at 10 hours, and that could drastically change again after I've gone through an entire year in-game. I won't be rating Seeds of Calamity on a scale, but I'll definitely talk about my experiences, the things that I like, and the things I wished it did differently, so that you can make an informed choice on whether this game is for you. So without further ado, let's get into the review. Seeds of Calamity, developed by Laborious Lark Studios, is a farming and life sim game with RPG elements and turn-based combat. In this game, you can do farming, crafting, ranching, fishing, catching bugs, upgrading your tools, decorating your farm, and exploring dungeons to battle bosses and get more loot. Seeds of Calamity is available as of April 13th, 2026 on the PC and retails for $14.99 USD. You are an adventurer who was assigned to this small village in order to help its reconstruction efforts after years of warfare that resulted in the Great Calamity. The game is pretty open-ended, as you're free to do whatever you want once you settle into town, so there's no main story that you're following. Once the game starts, you are prompted to create a character right away. There are some good options to change your appearance and the appearance of your spellbook companion. You are also prompted to select a farm type, which have various pros and cons. These include not being restricted with placements of your crops or animal pens, but with no other benefits, being restricted, but combat loot is worth more, and being restricted to place crops in a small area, but you start off with a farm animal. Once character customization is complete, you're told the story of the Great Calamity and the destruction that it brought on the world. In the aftermath of the Great Calamity, you arrive in Pine Lily Village to start your new assignment from the Adventurers Guild, which happens to be helping the village with its reconstruction efforts and starting a new life. I didn't get very far in the beginning 10 minutes as I was introduced to my farm, and then took a whole lot of time clicking on all of the exclamation marks that were basically over everything on my farm inside and out. When you interact with an exclamation mark, sometimes a helpful pop-up will appear with some information on the furniture. Additionally, there are tutorial pop-ups that appear on screen with information on how to move and use equipment. I was a little bit overwhelmed with the amount of exclamation marks that I saw. However, I was eager to start the game proper since I haven't even been able to plant anything yet. My impressions of the game in the first 10 minutes were pretty neutral since it was starting similarly to other farming sim games that I've played in the past. I did like the pixel art style, and I liked how the buildings look in the game. I appreciated that the NPCs have 2D portraits when they're talking to you, and I thought the spellbook companion was a neat addition. I couldn't wait to see how the spellbook companion would be utilized in the game, and I was eager to start my 1 hour. My first hour was spent making space on the farm to start planting my crops and exploring the town of Pine Lily a little bit more. I really like the hotbar layout in the game since it has associated shortcuts for every slot. The hotbar also separates tools and items so you can easily switch between them depending on what you're doing. So far, the farming and resource gathering are pretty basic in Seeds of Calamity. You buy seeds, you plant them in tilled soil, and water them daily until they're grown so you can harvest them. I'm wondering whether the crops will be used in any magical capacity, but at this point in time, I have no idea. For chopping trees and hitting rocks, it's pretty self-explanatory. You can get materials from them in exchange for depleting your stamina. You can use the resources you gather to craft items at the crafting table, and I do appreciate that the crafting table draws from nearby chests on your farm. I was also introduced to the fishing system, which is also basic. The fishing minigame consists of a spin wheel where you want to click in the targeted area to get a fish. Sometimes there are smaller target areas, which will give you a bonus if you manage to land on it, such as an extra resource. The bug catching system is pretty different than other games games in that you have to solve a riddle in order to know what item is needed to attract the bug that you're trying to get. You have to place the bait and then come back the following day to get your bug. I like this change up since it's unique in its approach, and eventually you do end up using the bugs for recipes in your cooking. Although hitting rocks is pretty standard, what isn't standard is the dungeon system. Seeds of Calamity uses a branching approach where the dungeons will change each time you go in, and you can choose which door to go through. There are symbols on the doors to indicate what you'll encounter next, so you can strategize how you best want to approach the string of rooms before getting to the boss. Some rooms I've encountered involve fighting monsters, mining ores, solving a puzzle for loot, and even a safe house room that will teleport you out of the dungeon if you are too hurt to continue. The game introduces elemental magic that can be learned by your spellbook companion to help you attack. More spells can be bought at Lady Valeska's magic shop in town. Right now, I only unlock the water spells, but later on you can synergize with different elements to create combos. The combat is turn-based. You have a set amount of action points to use during your turn, and each spell costs a different amount of action points as well as have different recharge times. This prevents you from spamming the same spell over and over again, so you're forced to at least use a different variety of spells in a turn depending on which ones are available and recharged. Once you run out of action points, then it's your opponent's turn and so on. I like this change up from the traditional farming sim mine recipe, and I think that at this point it's the game's standout feature. After using up my stamina on the farm and in the dungeon, that's my cue to go into town and mingle a little bit. I met with the residents, who are admittedly a small bunch. There's only about 8 of them in total, and the town itself is also very small. I don't have a good sense of the residents' personality just yet, but since there aren't too many of them, I at least was able to remember where they hang out pretty easily. Even though the residents are static in place and do not seem to wander around town at all, I do appreciate that they move to the tavern at night to hang out, so it does feel like the town is lived in a little bit. I also like that on the daily they might pop up in different places, so they're not just static in one position all the time. As I went about my business, I couldn't help but be super annoyed at all the tutorials that kept popping up. I felt as though the game was trying to hold my hand and explain every single detail to me, which was a bit exhausting. Although there were tips that I did appreciate, I also think that letting me find things organically and having the tips be less invasive would have worked better for me, since I felt so coddled during this time. I'm not sure if it's because I've played farming sim games in the past, or if I thought the frequency of the tips and tutorials were interrupting the flow of my early game exploration. Although the tutorials were a bit excessive, I was still enjoying my time in Seeds of Calamity. After the 1 hour mark, I felt as though I was just beginning my journey and really wanted to defeat the first boss, which meant having to train and level up my skills. Skills in this game can be leveled up through repetition of tasks, so farming more will increase your farming skill, fighting more will increase your combat skill, leveling up your skill will eventually lead you to branching specializations that you can choose in order to get that specific benefit. I had some other quests available from the townsfolk, and I really wanted to see what the game would evolve into after I've been playing for a little bit longer, so I was eager to continue playing to see what would happen after I beat the dungeons. I almost got to autumn by the time 10 hours came around. During this time, I've gotten used to the gameplay loop. You have different ways to earn money that includes farming, ranching, fishing, and selling gems and monster drops from what you find in the dungeons. With your money, you can buy new upgrades for your tools and spells, allowing you to work faster on the farm with your tools' increased range, and also allowing you to mix and match more elements to your spell repertoire. You can also cook food from the resources that you collect to heal your health or give you a little boost so that you can go farther in the dungeons. By the end of 10 hours, I wasn't sure if the gameplay loop would change in any significant way. I've been busy running my farm, raising rock hens, and making my way through the 3 levels of the dungeon. Each level plays the same, where you go through a series of doors and reach the boss at the end. I've been getting more proficient with elemental magic, and I can mix and match elements to combine them in order to deal additional damage or inflict status effects. I really like that the elemental magic has some sort of synergy, and eventually getting to each boss became easier with the more spells that I unlocked. For example, eventually I was able to unlock a lightning spell that does a large amount of damage to all enemies, but it has a chance to fail. If the enemy is soaked from a water spell, however, the attack is guaranteed to hit. So finding those little combos have been really fun to figure out what my playstyle is like. However, since completing the 3 levels of the dungeon, there haven't been any new ones that have popped up during my time, and I've been stuck going through the same floors in order to get the specific monster drops, gemstones, ores, or other collectibles for quests that the villagers might have, or that I could donate to the temple, which unlocks sometimes during the 10 hours and serve as the community center where I can donate items for rewards once I complete a bundle. At around the 1 hour mark, I did wonder whether crops would be used in any magical ways beyond just selling them for money, and I did get an answer at 10 hours. For the most part, crops can be used in different recipes in order to craft dishes that will heal you, and some even provide some buffs that you can take advantage of. However, I did not do too much cooking during my time with the game, and I found that selling the crops was more beneficial to me than using them in a recipe. After going through the dungeons multiple times, I was able to amass a large number of health potions, so I chose to use that instead of using my crops that I can sell for way more money. There is an area that I cannot access since it needs a very specific fish that can only be caught in the spring, and unfortunately I didn't realize this while it was still springtime. The traveling merchant does not sell it, so I guess if there was another dungeon that I could explore, it won't be for this review specifically because I'm locked out until year 2. In regards to the relationships, which I usually focus more on around the 10-hour mark, I have a very complicated view on the villagers of Pine Lily Town. There's only 8 of them, as I've mentioned, and no one else has moved in since then. There's no relationship tracker, and there's no mechanic for you to give them any gifts. The villagers do not move naturally around the village on the daily, like I mentioned. As I continue playing, this still did not bother me too much because they will be in different spots on the daily. Sometimes an NPC will be in their house or outside. Sometimes they'll talk to each other and yield different conversations. So it does feel like time is moving and the villagers are going about their lives, even though they're not actually physically moving around. Unfortunately, since there was no real relationship building for my character, I just didn't really feel that connected to them. I felt more like an outsider watching them and doing quests whenever they needed me to do something. I learned a lot about them, but I just feel like we didn't have a very mutual relationship. I ended my 10 hours pretty concerned with whether the game was going to have enough for me to do in the autumn and winter time beyond just completing bundles for the temple. And this is something that happens to a lot of indie farming sim games that I've noticed, where the beginning starts off really strong, but then by the time that the 10 hours rolls in, there's not much to do the rest of the year. I am hoping that I am wrong though, so I'm just continuing to play and hoping that more dungeons will unlock along the way. I reached the new year after 16 hours of playing the game. As I suspected, autumn and winter did drag, mainly because there wasn't anything different to do. I was delving in the same dungeons, fighting the same bosses by using the same spell combinations each fight. I managed to get sprinklers to handle the watering of my crops, and feeding my animals didn't take up too much time each morning. I did unlock a boss rush mode on winter 9. I managed to complete it on my first try, and then went back to not really having a goal besides making it to the end of the year and completing whatever bundles I could. The villagers did have quests that would pop up whenever you see them in town or through the mail, which thankfully did offer me something different to do every now and then. I like that some of the quests will change the environment, and there's even a quest where you can help develop the relationship of 2 villagers even if you really can't develop your own. Luckily, I had little tidbits of things to do until winter finally ended and spring was back once more. So with that, let's talk about the things that I like and the things I wish were different. I like the spell system in the game where different elemental spells will have additional effect when combined with other elemental spells. For example, there is a lightning spell that cloaks you, and then a water spell that does double damage while you are cloaked. Finding the spell that works the best for my playstyle was really fun, and I enjoyed this addition to the game to make it stand out from other farming sims. I like the branching nature of the dungeons where you can choose which room to go down and there's a boss at the end. You can see your progress and what the rooms ahead will contain. This makes the dungeon system a lot more engaging than just a mine because you're actively choosing to go down a certain room. If you don't want to fight monsters, you can go down the mining path. Or if you're trying to find specific drops, you might want to go down the doors that has more monsters. Having this choice is just really fun in my opinion and keeps the dungeon system fresh. Like I mentioned in my 10 hours, I like that the NPCs in the game still have some character even if they are static. Sometimes when you go into town, they'll be at different locations or hanging out with each other. They show up to the tavern at night and their dialogue is varied enough where you do feel like time is progressing as they will comment on the changing season, events that are coming up, or things that you have helped them with. Though I appreciate that the game does its best to make sure that the NPCs are placed at different spots and have changing dialogue, I can't help but feel as though the system is missing something. And this is not to say that I need romance in a farming sim, even though it helps, but the town does feel relatively small with only 8 NPCs. Maybe it's due to the fact that I'm not sure if my character is actually developing a relationship with the townsfolk. There's no gifting options or relationship tab to track my progress. Usually whenever you talk to them, they will give information about themselves. You do get a lot of their backstory through the quests that they have for you, which is really great. But at the same time, there's still a block there for me. I still felt like an outsider who was just living on the outskirts of town and helping the villagers whenever they needed something, but not necessarily feeling like I was part of the village. I really like the spell system, but once I found a combo that I liked which did the most damage, I would use the same spells in the same order for every fight, which really made it feel monotonous after a while. Of course, I wasn't really expecting a fleshed out system that was super complicated, but I was hoping that there would be some differences in the enemies so that you would have to change up your playstyle to keep it fresh. Like if there were enemies that were more resistant to water, so I would be forced to rely on the other elements a bit more to get through those fights. I really wish that the festival shops would stock more than one quantity of an item. I'm not expecting it to stock 99 banners, but having more than one of each item would be great for decorating purposes, at least for symmetry's sake. If not, I wish that I could at least get the crafting recipe for the item so that I could just make my own. There is a bug in the game where sometimes when I'm fighting the enemies, their text box will disappear and the game will not advance. You can't click on anything and basically your only solution that I found was to go back to the main menu to get back into the game. The game will prompt you to save at this point, so when you go back in, it resets the fight. You'll have to fight the enemies over again from the beginning. This does happen quite frequently, so it is very annoying to have to redo a fight every so often. Lastly, I definitely wish that there was a setting to turn off the excessive amount of tutorials, whether in the beginning or in the settings menu. I was really annoyed by the amount that I encountered since it felt very handholdy and it didn't give me any room to find out anything on my own. The tutorial will just tell me about it right away. I do understand the need for some basic control tutorials for the farm and the dungeon mechanics, but otherwise I felt like the player could naturally figure out information that they need with a bit of exploration. Or at least if the tutorials and tips were going to pop up, then they're not as intrusive as they are in the game. I really struggled with getting through autumn and winter due to the lack of activities, so I think that by the time the second year came around, I had completed most of the things that I wanted to do in this game. There are no overarching goals that I want to reach besides completing the bundles, but even then, collecting more rewards to help me farm is not that appealing to me at this point. I don't really have a lot of things to spend my money on at this point since I've upgraded all my spells and my tools and utilized a lot of the free space on my farm, so it's not like I can just keep buying more animals. I don't even really mind not being able to explore whatever is behind the seal that is unlocked by that one spring fish at this point. I won't be playing more of the game unless new content is added. Of course, I do want to commend that Seeds of Calamity was created by a solo developer, and overall the game has a great foundational system. I just wanted a little bit more. I like how the NPCs were handled, but I just wanted something more than what we got because I still felt alienated from them. I'm not sure if adding a relationship system would increase my affinity with the villagers, but I just feel like there's something more that could have been added. I just don't know what it is at this point. I like the battle spell system, although I wanted more variation, so I would have to use different combos. I like that there are different handicaps that you can give yourself in the beginning of the game, but I don't think it really impacted how I played overall, since you really don't have that much money in the beginning to fill out your field anyways, and just from the way that I play, I don't usually utilize all of my farm space. I think this game has great foundational systems and a really great opener in the spring and summer. As you're going through the dungeons and as you're farming, you have a goal in mind to get to the bottom of the dungeon and see what's there, and that was really exciting for me. However, I think the game could have added a little bit more because by the time autumn and winter rolls around, there's really not much more you can do after you beat the dungeons. I think this game is for you if you want a different approach to the combat in a farming sim game. The branching dungeon system and the elemental spells is a big highlight of the game. The farming itself is very traditional, so if you are familiar with farming sims, it will be very easy to pick up in that sense. You may not be a fan of the lack of relationships, and yet I still do appreciate how the NPCs were handled despite this. Usually when I see static NPCs in a farming sim, they are not in different locations on the daily. Their dialogue is pretty limited, so this really gives a great overview of how to do static NPCs right. Well, there you have it. What do you think about Seeds of Calamity? Is this the game for you? If so, show the developers some love and wishlist this game or purchase it for yourself. If you like what I do and you want to see more, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel for more content like this. I do send out polls occasionally to let the community decide what my next review game will be, so keep a lookout for that if you want a certain game review. You can also leave a comment below on what game you want to see me review next, and I'll take it into consideration. Thank you so much for making it to the end of this video. It means a lot to me that I have your support, and I am off to fight another dungeon boss. I will see you in the next video. Take care. Bye.